You crest a low hill in the forest, finding it lit by scattered hellfire. In the center, a demon of the old world unfurls its wings, welcoming you to your last breath.
You enjoy role-playing games? Did you know that the game that has become a multi-million-dollar worldwide media phenomenon began in some old dude's basements? Once upon a time, role-playing games were an underground sensation, the same way comics and metal were. Through the ups and downs of markets, the satanic panic, and changes in what is and is not popular, role-playing games have grown. Kickstarters make millions. New generations of players and game masters are finding role-playing games every day. Everywhere you look, there are big box games full of color with the same accessories you find in big board games. But there's still plenty of games being made in basements, in living rooms, at dining tables, and on laptops in coffee shops. The spirit of the independent game is alive and well. And here we want to bring you conversations on indie games, on the designs that you might be interested in, and most importantly, on indie designers. These are the faces behind indie role-playing games. And beyond designers, other members of the role-playing game media, and beyond that, we'll speak to artists. Anyone associated with the indie RPG scene is fair game. And, as you might have noticed in the introduction, we'll be covering a large range of indie RPG. Not just pen and paper, but also video games as well. And maybe even dive into RPG lit from time to time. I love that image. I love the sound of dice hitting the deck, determining the fate of characters, and sometimes whole emergent stories. It'd be exciting for everyone at the table to witness the events play out. Because even if there are miniatures or character art, everyone's idea of how actions occur at the table looks different. And indie games often skew big productions. We're using different methods of fortune. That would be dice, if you don't know what fortune is. And relying on the theater of your mind as opposed to the theater of your table. Regardless of how or where you engage in play, it is the play that is the most significant piece. How will the situation resolve itself, if at all? I can't lie to you about your chances. I grew up on games that were hard on the characters and still prefer that level of play. But indies come in all shapes and sizes, and plenty of games where death is not on the table. They are an expression of the time, and times have changed. New voices are being heard, different paradigms are being explored, fresh ideas of setting and design are getting pumped into the art every day. We'd love for you to be a part of that ongoing conversation in a place where RPGs are underground art. It might be a bit idealistic, but that is what being an indie designer means to me. Taking chances in a world that wants you to play it safe, design the same old design, and focus on the cold success of numbers over fire a player's passion for the game. In this, for now, monthly show on the GoIndieNow network, we're going to talk to indie designers about their games. We're going to talk about concepts, indie RPG news, upcoming conventions, and more. That more includes some live actual play with the designer and or a game they have designed. This month, I'm happy to welcome Egg Embry, indie designer, journalist who has written for EN World, among other popular sites. I will talk to Egg about what it means to be an indie these days and some of the designers he follows. And we will talk about Egg's own games and the philosophies behind them. Plus, on Monday, October 2nd, Egg will lead a group of players through a session of Hillman, Almost, a post-cyberpunk news procedural. Welcome to Zero Means You're Dead. Before we get into the news and today's thoughts, let me introduce myself. Professionally, I'm SM Hillman. Use the dots or don't. But most folks refer to me as Sean. I'm an independent author and game designer. I began role-playing games in the early 1980s. Yes, the last millennia. But I'm proud to say I enjoy games across the spectrum, from old dungeon crawls to kids riding on bikes, vanquishing the sinister forces of middle school. I just want to mention a couple of items that have caught my eye this month before we get into our interview segment. We are big fans of conventions here at GoIndieNow. And one of our favorites these days is Multiverse Con. Multiverse started in 2019 and has a strong play track. This year, I'm happy to say that we're having more gaming than ever, and we'll have our second year of an actual play of the Chuck Tingle RPG last night in Bozeman. Full disclosure, I run the play track at Multiverse, but if you have a convention that has a strong indie RPG presence, leave a comment or shoot us an email with the subject ZMYD Cons. Multiverse Con is October 20th to the 22nd in Atlanta, Georgia. You can find the link in the description below. I know con season is winding down, but still, if you have something happening in November, late October, December, absolutely let us know. Egg Embry, our guest, covers crowdfunding for EN World and other media outlets. I grabbed one of the campaigns Egg covered over at EN World, all linked below. The game is Duke Bowie, or Duckborg, a game about fantasy ducks going on fantasy adventures. If you know anything about some of the RPGs, RuneQuest, which is not an indie, but some of the other RPGs as well, Dragonbane, also not an indie game, but recent. Ducks are big. People like playing ducks. I'll just leave it at that. So Egg describes it as DuckTales, but for Merkbowie or Morkborg, depending how you say it, but I believe it's pronounced Merk Bowie and Duke Bowie. If you're familiar with Merk Bowie, then you may already be aware of Duke Bowie. And if not, check them both out. I apologize to people in Sweden. I know I butchered those names. This week is a blog post over at Staggered Amusements blog titled Houston, We Have a Problem Running Technical Sci-Fi RPGs. It talks about the difficulties in running an RPG that is more science fact than science fiction. The author does a credible job of laying out some of the problem areas with technically based RPG sessions and some ways to work around that. Especially players who may not be as technically focused or experienced as you or the game material you're working with. I think that's if I may go off script for a moment, I think that's important. Hard sci-fi is a lot of fun to read, but it's also a lot of fun to play. Working in worlds where the magic is their science and getting way to feel credible and technical and feels tactile. So yeah, I thought it was a great blog. Check it out. You might find it as interesting as I do. Again, the link is below. So I have one correction. It's actually a pre-correction correction. So Egg and I mentioned Shadow Dark RPG, but we could not remember the author's name. I apologize to that. Kelsey, if you're watching, I hope you are. The author is Kelsey Dion. Shadow Dark was a big success. It's old school meets 5e RPG, fantasy. I should have stopped the interview, went and looked up the names, and I did not, and I apologize for that. We'll get that right in the future. We also mentioned the supplement for it called Unnatural Selection. We didn't know the creator's name, Bunny Daniel. Bunny, I apologize. We should have looked up your name during the interview. We didn't. Again, that's something we'll do better going forward. So, with very little delay, I present to you my interview with Egg Embry. I hope you enjoy. All right. Well, I'm here with Egg Embry, friend of mine, fellow gamer, and quite the journalist for role-playing games. Egg is a contributor to EN World or N World. I've heard it both ways, and I don't know which one's correct. Knights of the Dinner Table, which is a favorite of mine, D20 Radio, and Around the Table for Gamma Magazine, among a lot of other things.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for being on here. So I'm just going to start with basically let you introduce yourself to people. What was the first role-playing game that you played?
Oh, first edition D&D. I started making a character for Star Frontier, but never played. So first edition D&D.
Do you still play D&D?
I'm running a hybrid 5th edition campaign that is mostly an engine to give it some structure. Basically the entire campaign is, hey, roll perception. So you failed the perception roll. Let me tell you what happened anyways.
Gotcha. How do you think D&D has influenced, at least since 5th edition, the indie game movement, if at all?
Advantage and disadvantage? I mean, I know it existed before D&D and 5th edition, all that, but that's the one that I see most frequently. The indie game movements, if you're talking about, say, the OSR side of it, where we're seeing, and some of this will be a little removed from OSR, some of it will be nailing OSR. If you count that as indie games for Morkborg or Vasgrim, Mothership, any of those where we're still working with the basics of Dungeons & Dragons. You have a character, they have hit points, you have an attack, and you're good for looting. The general setup of what Gary and Dave Arneson left with is kind of where we're at, right?
Right.
When you're talking about D&D itself and a lot of the games that came from it, obviously there are other options and there's other things that you can do, and there's a lot of things that you can do within D&D. We do a very role-play heavy game when I play it. But, in terms of what the mechanics offer, it's that. In terms of how it influences indie games, a lot of the time when I'm talking to indie developers, their number one goal seems to be to not be 5e. So you do have the games that they take elements of it, at least the OSR type of element. And then you have the other side of the house where they're going for Powered by the Apocalypse or something else that is further removed from the framework of D&D.
Yeah, I agree with you. I noticed over the last 3 years, especially, advantage and disadvantage popping up in a lot of games and a lot of game systems in various ways. Even Dragonbane has that in it as well, which Dragonbane itself is a little bit of a grab bag of a lot of systems, I think.
It is. But it's a good time.
It is a good time. It is a good time. Absolutely. What's your favorite role-playing game?
The favorite one? Okay. Since it's sitting right next to me, I'm doing a review of it for Knights of the Dinner Table, and it's not my favorite of all time, but Zombie World. So from Magpie Games, I bought Zombie World Gen Con 2019, didn't play it, and by the way, it comes in a box, right? So not a big game. I thought it looked neat, but I never played it. Okay.
Right.
Gen Con 2023, I'm like, well, we got to remedy that situation. So I played it. And it's a card-based, Powered by the Apocalypse, Walking Dead, 28 Days Later, any George Romero movie, just condensed down to where you're going to be very simple character creation with a lot of depth to your character, relatively, for the amount of time that they're going to be alive. Because it's a zombie game, so it's going to be a character grinder in a lot of ways, right?
Right, yeah.
But Powered by the Apocalypse does not tend to be a character grinder sort of game. So they took the best of OSR, the character grinder that everyone loves, because who wants to spend 3 hours making a character for them to die in 15 minutes? OSR.
Sorry.
So they took that, they condensed it down to where character creation is. I mean, if it's 5 minutes, you took too long when you're creating your survivor in the zombie apocalypse, and you're good to go. This game just takes the Powered by the Apocalypse system, takes and puts it in cards instead of dice, and it blew me away the first time I played it because I realized that this is the game that I've been waiting for, because this is the game that I want to use to introduce people into role playing as long as they like zombies. Because I meet a lot of people and they want to play D&D, right? And there's no problems with D&D. It's a great game. Okay, I'm not going to take anything away from it. It's a lot of fun. But the first time I sat down to play D&D, the 5th time I sat down to play D&D, the 10th time, because it was first edition, I'm like, okay, now I follow Thaco.
Right.
And even in 5th edition, you're going to be several sessions in before you really get the mechanics, right? And you get the advantages that your character has. This one, it's a couple of cards, and it's really straightforward, but there's still some intricacy to your character in Zombie World. And because it's card-based, okay, one of the things that I've found when introducing people to RPGs is that dice are intimidating, okay? It's the reason so many of the indie games, they just do D6s, right? They're less intimidating because most people have held a D6 in their hand. But if you move it away from dice completely, that removes a whole factor of concern, right? If you move it to straight cards, you're good because everyone's played a board game, and everybody that's played a board game dealt with cards, and they have instructions written on them. It cuts down on questions, cuts down on concerns. I was extremely impressed in one session at Gen Con of Zombie World. It blew my mind.
Right.
Not my favorite game of all time, but still a fun game. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, for those who don't know about Powered by the Apocalypse, it's definitely something you should check out. But it has something called moves, which really are just actions. But the Zombie World have moves?
Yes. So, okay, so this is postcard size, right? It's dry erase. This is your whole character sheet. It's got 2 of your moves here, okay? Moves being actions. And then it's got another postcard that's got all your basic moves and then all of your zombie moves. And those are your moves when you're dealing with the zombies. And these are your moves when you're dealing with people in the environment. Okay, so those are your actions. And you're going to draw X number of cards to see whether you had a triumph. If you did have a triumph, then everything went exactly as you want it to. You get some sort of advantage. If you have a hit, which is an edge, I think what they call it. And anyways, that's like it worked, but there was a complication. Or miss. And if you have a miss, then there's a possibility there's zombies around and someone's going to eat you.
Always a danger in a zombie apocalypse.
I mean, you know who the bad guys are? They're the people. But the zombies make nice window dressing.
Yes, they do. Absolutely. Awesome. I was actually going to say, what's your favorite indie RPG? But do you have one that's different than Zombie World?
So CBR plus P&K, I don't have it sitting here to show you, but it is a bunch of pamphlets. Recently kickstarted. I really like different form factors, right? So like a book, a box set, cards, pamphlets. I love all the different kinds of things it can be, right? So CBR plus P&K, Cyberpunk. The concept was just a single pair of pamphlets or single pamphlet that told this whole game. You're Cyberpunk. It's your very last run. You're going to need to make enough money to retire, or you don't make it. This concept behind the game, Forged in the Dark, which is a variation of Powered by the Apocalypse. You're Cyberpunk. You're with a Cyberpunk team. You're on that mission, right? They did the Kickstarter for it where they took it from just a PDF to actual print version. They went with the same dry erase that I just mentioned for Zombie World. So you can write on your character sheet. It comes as, I think, 10 pamphlets. So 5 of them are the character sheets. And then one's the core rules. And then the other 4 are either adventures or adding stuff to your RPGs, such as Weird, which is the fantasy elements for Shadowrun-esque Cyberpunk. or one that adds basically what amounts to the Predator to your world.
Okay.
But it's a lot of fun, simple dice rolling and stuff like that, simple mission, you're on your last run, make it count, with a system that really supports all that. But at the same time, because when I was young, having 10 500-page books was awesome.
Yeah.
Give me all the setting, give me all the rules, give me all the crunch. Let's go through and hunt down this single rule to see if you defeated the dragon or not. At my current age, with my current responsibilities, if you give me everything in a single page or two, oh, you are my hero. You are my hero.
Absolutely. And I think an indie game definitely is a good format for that sort of very simple, here it is, here's a system, here's the basics, just go play. What kind of indie RPG spaces have you inhabited over the years? For instance, like the Forge or Story Games, places like that. Were you ever active or an observer in those sites or those places?
No, unfortunately. In terms of just the indie space, I meet a fair number of people online. Because of my position within RPG journalism, where I am doing what amounts to advertising for Kickstarters, right?
Right.
Alan Barr came up to me, the guy, Gallant Knight Games, creator of Tiny D6 and Toompunk. Okay. I'm at Gen Con and two guys are talking to me, and Alan comes up behind me, and Alan's much taller than I am, puts his arm on my shoulder and goes, "You know what the thing about being an RPG journalist is? Everybody wants to be your friend." And it kind of was true that, all the creators, you're the only person that I know that's going to talk about my game, so let's talk about it. So being in those different sites, no, I have not done a good job. And anything indie RPG that is in Discord, I get so many of those invites, and I try to go on Discord. I try to love it. I try, but it's hard. So instead, it's a lot of social media for me. It's a lot of seeing things on that. It is a lot of checking out Kickstarters. It's a lot of going on Itch. It's a lot of you know what? If y'all were to do more Itch funders, I would check those out, But as much as I can, I check out as many games as I can. Unfortunately, this goes back to the whole time and, give me 10 500-page books when I'm young. And now, if you give me a page, I'm going to check that out.
Right. Absolutely. So speaking of crowdfunding for indie games, Shadow Dark, which is an OSR game from an indie creator who, and I think we can talk about this too at some point, coming from YouTube, I believe, and made some money. Is this a trend, or is this something specific that a creator has to do to kind of build that audience, do you think?
This specific RPG, so the creator, and she nailed it in every way that you could. Okay. One of my great regrets is I never met Gary. Gary Gygax, never met him. She, on the other hand, actually has where she starts is she's running a game and Gary compliments her on it. So, she's got that history, right? And that's a really nice piece of pedigree to have, right?
Absolutely.
And she's took that when he said, "Hey, I like what you're doing, go with it." And she's grown that. And the ideas that she has generated are super good. It's not just the presence of being on YouTube or Gary saying, "Hey, go for it." It's the fact that she sat down and looked at just really simple things. And she had so many of those moments. These are what you think of as the duh moments. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, man, why didn't I think of that? Duh.
Right. Yep. Agreed.
And Shadow Dark is overflowing with those ideas to where you're just oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, that's really good. Oh, the main one that everyone resonates with is torches. They last 1 hour in the real world, and there's no dark vision. And suddenly torches, which are the most, half your party can see in the dark anyways, the other half got a torch. And unless you got some serious thought put into where everyone's at, everyone can just see, it's fine. Now that no one can see in the dark, torches last an hour. Now there's some tension. How many torches did you bring?
Right. Yep.
Things like that, to where it's just like, oh, this is brilliant. You know, she had the audience, she had the right ideas, she had the product. I mean, the book is not out in physical form yet. I talked to another creator, did an interview on Ian World with her about her supplement for the book because she has, the PDF is out. So I don't want
Right.
to say the game isn't available, it's just the physical. And she's made a source book from it, and that source book is doing really well.
Oh, wow. Okay, good.
You
So
know,
that's one creator feeding in another.
yes,
Awesome. So, kind of circling back a little bit to the indie scene, um, here in Atlanta, we have quite a few creators. There's Nerdburger, Craig. Give shout out to Craig.
mhm.
What do you think Atlanta has that's attracted so many gamers to it, and designers as well?
I mean, as the only person from Atlanta that's from Atlanta,
Right.
I mean, where you're from Baltimore?
Right. Yeah. Basically. Yeah.
I mean, that's what's attracted so many people. You didn't come for the gaming, you came for a job. Craig's from Wisconsin, bless his heart. And if I'm wrong about that, Craig, I apologize. But he's from there. Lots of people come to Atlanta for jobs. It was a transfer city forever before the pandemic, and we all started working from home. And then when we all went back to the office, but Atlanta was a transfer city. You
Yeah.
got transferred by your job here. And
Right.
now it's the eighth largest metropolitan area in the United States in terms of size,
Yeah.
population, and people are just coming. And so inevitably, you're going to have a bunch of people that show up that are RPGers. You got Craig, you got Brian Collin, who works for Infinite Black and came up with Vast Rim and Creature Curation. His stuff's amazing. The Kickstarters speak for themselves in terms of the numbers. And he's in Metro Atlanta. You've got uh, Jerry Joe Seltzer. God, I hope I'm not messing up his last name. He does one of the books that I really liked. It's a 5e companion called Unfamiliars, which just twists on or turns on every wizard was at the conclave, right?
Hmm.
Someone cast the spell that freed all their familiars. So you're one of the familiars, and all the wizards are gone. Now you got to figure out what's going on. So you're the familiars, right? You don't have anywhere near the power of the humans. Okay.
Right.
But this is a great, like, it's a source book, it's an adventure, it's a bunch of classes, it's a lot of fun. He's done that. Jerry's out of Savannah, Georgia. And these, again, I'm picking on people that they've had a presence in terms of their crowdfundings, have done well, so have a number to reflect on. And then obviously Atlanta was, for the longest time, the town next to where I lived growing up was home to White Wolf. So Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, all that came from creators that lived in Atlanta. Well, they came up with the ideas while they were on the road to Gen Con at different places, but when they came back and published them, they published them here.
Right.
So,
What effect do you think DragonCon has had on that? Because I know I came to Atlanta really first to go to DragonCon and game mostly. So
awesome. Well, that's fair. That's fair. My father, when I was 14, dropped me off in downtown Atlanta and said, go have fun. I didn't have any friends that were there, so I just kind of got in line, paid the money, went in, did DragonCon, right? Uh, for those of y'all that are not local to Atlanta, there's no point in 2023 that you would drop off a 14-year-old boy in downtown Atlanta and say, you go have fun, I'll pick you up later.
right,
Okay.
no,
It was a completely different world back then.
yeah, absolutely.
In terms of the convention, so I have been getting more and more into Dragon Con again over the years. For the longest time, I did not go. Went a lot in my youth and then didn't go for a very long time. But in the past couple of years, especially post pandemic, the thing about Dragon Con is they're making a real effort with the tabletop gaming. We're seeing a lot of growth in that at that convention. And, for a while, tabletop gaming was not a big deal thing for anybody, right?
Right.
And for those that have never been to Dragon Con, it is as close to a geek fest for uh, the flyover states as you could possibly get, in my opinion, because it has celebrities, it has really popular mass media stuff. Okay, it's not the same thing as San Diego Comic Con, but it has elements of that to where you can just be a regular person and go to the convention, and you don't have to be into a lot of geek stuff. You'll have a good time. I go to, say, Gen Con or Heroes Con in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is a big comic book convention. And you've either got to be into tabletop games to enjoy Gen Con, or you've got to be into comics to enjoy Heroes Con. But here, there's at Dragon Con, there's a little bit for everybody, right? And so when tabletop gaming, other than Magic the Gathering and some board games, was, I don't want to say on a decline because I don't want to get called out on that, but like the role playing side was not doing as well. There was a decline at the convention because fewer people were playing. Now we're seeing, I feel, an increase, and I'm expecting that to continue.
Good.
Last year while I was at the convention, I got to talk to Steve Jackson of Steve Jackson Games, GURPS and Munchkin and all that. And every year, the creator Eberron for D&D, I shouldn't say every year, most years, the creator for Eberron is here.
Keith Baker?
Yes. Now, I have never spoken with him, so maybe I'm talking totally out of turn, but I always he's always got a panel, and it's never at a convenient time for me. But there's a lot of fun at Dragon Con, and since they're giving a new focus to tabletop gaming, that is helping. Plus this year we got to see more indie style games there.
Okay, that's where I was going to go next. For an indie creator, Dragon Con or Gen Con, some of the big conventions, even Origins, are those worth your time to do more than run a couple of your games? Is it worth your time to vend? Is it worth your time to have a presence at one of these big conventions? Do you think, your opinion?
If you've hit the right level, it's very worth your time to do all the big conventions. So in my publishing side level, right, in the Carolinas, there's Mythic Con. Okay. Less than 1,000 people attend it. If you go there and run games, they will let you sell the games that you run at your gaming table, something that you can't do at the other big conventions. You cannot sell outside the dealer's hall unless you have special permission.
Right.
But for something like Mythic Con, they will let you sell your game. So if you're at the level I'm at, it would be a good idea to go, say, Mythic Con and just run games the whole time and try to sell. I was at AndoCon here in Atlanta, and Motorcycle Mouse Thunder Say, God, I'm messing up the name. Anyways, the guy that created the game, in which we play mice who are on motorcycles in a city going through adventures. It's a fate system. We played the game there, and we got to the end of it, and he said, "Hey, I've got the game here if you want to buy it." And every single person, because we all had a great time, bought a copy of the game.
Right.
That's really where a lot of creators at my level, which is a very low level in terms of the actual publishing, probably want to start out, right? You'll be converting people, and at the same time, if they had a good time, chances they're going to buy your product is high. Also, they don't tend to charge for having a table. When you get over to Dragon Con, Origins, Gen Con, you got to shell out some money for table and all that, right? Craig Campbell, I think, did this the best in terms of watching his trajectory over the years with Nerdburger Games. So the Indie Game Design Network is a collective of indie game designers. Nerdburger Games was a part of that, right? And so what happens is this whole collective that is a bunch of different creators, gets together and gets a booth. If you're at the convention, you can come over to the booth because you got a place. If you're not at the convention, you still pay for part of the space to have your stuff sold. They sell, you provide the product, they sell your product, you get the cut of the profits. Okay. But if you're there, obviously you can hand sell your product and you're going to do much better. So Eric Blout, I've run into him when he's at that booth, and he can hand sell you all his products. And guess what? He does great. Nerdburger Games, they're at the booth, so they can hand sell you their products. That does great. However, the other games they got there, they still sell because they have awesome games. So Craig did that for years. This was the first year that he got his own booth at Gen Con, ran it for himself, right? Had a large number of people, brought more people to run his games, and it's been the trajectory of growth, right? He built up, did all the steps that you need to do. So he didn't just start at Gen Con with a booth and then one night it didn't work out well. He had established himself, and it was just time to, leave the nest and go have his own table, and he did well. So I'm very excited for him. For other creators, I absolutely feel, because Dragon Con is going to be a mixed bag, right? Because it's a bunch of different things. So maybe your game will hit, maybe it won't. Okay. Just depends. But Origins and definitely Gen Con, because Gen Con is so many people, if you have a quality product, you're going to find an audience of some sort. Whether it's worth your time or not just depends on how much effort you put into it. But, I see a lot of indie creators there year after year after year. And, it's a lot of times I want to buy something, I'm second or third person in line, and it just stays 2 or 3 people deep the whole time. So, bless their hearts, I feel they're doing well.
Yeah. Awesome. Just quick about your own stuff. You sell at Drive-Thru, but you also sell at Itch.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about both of those platforms
Yeah.
for creators who may not be aware of them or maybe intimidated about using them?
Okay, I'm gonna sound like a real buffoon with this. Okay, so like I'm gonna be honest here, but be prepared to just his views don't represent the views of anyone with any sense. Okay. My experience with both of them is that I like both of them. They're different platforms. They both have qualities. Okay. I can definitely spend days telling you what is wrong with them, but that's not productive. What I can tell you is right with them is the ability to connect with people in both platforms. Here's where I'm going to get controversial. Okay. My experience is that there's an age divide between the two systems. When I talk to new creators that tend to be young, they're on Itch. Okay. When I talk to more tenured people that are more used to old internet websites, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Drive-Thru, they're going to be doing a nice interface update and all that. It's going to be a great looking new setup, not taking anything away. But the generation that is used to cantankerous websites, which is 90% of the internet,
Yeah.
they have a much easier time navigating Drive-Thru in terms of being a publisher and setting up all your stuff and all the things you got to go through. But they may not love Itch because it's a little bit freeform. But then you flip it around to the younger, newer creators. They love them some Itch. They love them some Itch. But then, Drive-Thru is what it is. And that's why I generally feel there's a divide that tends to be more generational.
Okay.
I think that Itch is really good for young creators. I really feel that whenever they put together one of those bundles, Drive-Thru has a ton of bundles, right? But when Itch puts one together to where, for $20, you're going to get $4 million worth of content, as every single person on Itch gives you every game that they've ever had, for whatever charitable cause. And you're like, it's hard to walk away from this deal knowing that I cannot download onto my computer $4 million worth of content, but hey, gotta try.
Gotta try. Gotta get that external hard drive.
Oh my God. There's no amount of Google Drive excess space that you can house all this stuff on. So, they offer a lot of good in terms of the user interface for a publisher, right? I really like the fact that with Itch, you can customize the page a bit more. You can make it look a little bit more how you want it to look. With Drive-Thru, everything looks the same, which is really good to me as a customer. I really like everything looking the same when I'm going through pages, right? Tells me where I always need to go and look for information. With Itch, you have a lot more customization options. You can make, if you're really proud of your artwork, you can make a bigger display of it, but each of them have their strengths. The big thing, though, is that depending on the type of game you're producing, the type of audience you're wanting to generate, one of the sites might be better for you than the other. I don't really generate, because all my games are free, I don't generate sales, but in terms of interest, I tend to do better on Drive-Thru. It isn't that I don't do anything on Itch, it's just Drive-Thru does better.
Right.
So, but the thing that I like about Itch, I can see the page engagement and how much they download. drive through, you can just see how much they download.
Okay. Oh, excellent. Thank you. I'm hoping a lot of people will see that and be encouraged to find their own space. Tell folks a little bit about Human Almost, because that's what we're going to be playing on Hit the Dice.
Which will be awesome.
It will be
So
awesome.
basically, there's a show called Almost Human. Okay.
Right.
It stars Carl Urban and Michael Eadley. It's post cyberpunk. So it's the nice, corrupt future. You know, like the corporations won, but they made a nice planet for you to be on. And it's a police procedural that was on Fox, so you can only like roll 2d6 to find out how many episodes it lasted for before they canceled it.
Right, exactly.
You play either the android or the human. All humans have an android partner, okay? And y'all are out there solving crimes. Has a lot of random crime tables and things such as that. Like I said, post cyberpunk, so you're going to be playing a police procedural, and it has rules that I hope support police procedural play. Mostly that just whatever kind of zany thing that you can come up with that sounds like TV police procedural garbage to me, to where it's like, oh yeah, I know a guy. Yes, you do. Oh yeah, like the crime lab came back with this. Yes, they did. You know, anything that you can think of, we're going to allow it to play, because if anyone here has ever watched a police procedural and they see the main actor pulling out their rear end with the answer, like, oh, really? This is worse than Star Trek for just knowing what the answer is. We're going to be doing that. We're going to have a lot of fun, because I really like the cyberpunk genre. I really like the concept of machines, AI, people, corporations, and corruption. And since Almost Human, which this is based on, obviously, it's an homage. It is not licensed. It is, this reason it's free. It has to be free. But you know, it is a love letter to this show that did not last that long. There was still a lot of fun. And we're going to pick up with the crazy, zany murders and investigations, and like, it's the far future and everything can be tracked. So we still got to come up with the most zany murder that happened. And then y'all go to investigate that. And then look, another murder that's just as nuts happened. And then another, but now you're to the climax. So y'all can go ahead and solve the case.
Gotcha. I'm looking forward to it. Definitely Human Almost. I played it once before at Multiverse, and that was a really good time. Really good time. So I'm looking forward to seeing that again. And so, yeah, folks, just a quick reminder that we'll be the companion to Zero Means You're Dead is Hit the Dice, and that's where we'll have actual play of a game that we talk about for each interview.
Which will be awesome.
It will be awesome. I think people are going to love that. So let's circle back to Powered by the Apocalypse and OSR. Let's first, because it's a system, not a larger, I guess, what we would call it. I know. My friend Ron calls it kind of a marketing scheme, but there are some really good designs coming out of OSR. I think more so now than there were originally.
Powered by the Apocalypse. When I first found out about it, right, because everything's a move. 2d6, you're rolling against a static chart. Okay, 6 or less, you failed, and the GM gets a move. 7 to 9, you know, it's a middling success. It worked, but there was a cost. You know, 10 and above, you succeeded. Everything's going hunky-dory. Let's roll the dice again. And since everything's move-based, you have a really simplistic set of actions, right? It cuts down on analysis paralysis. I have made a mistake when playing 5e in not limiting my players to just a certain 5 or 10 spells, because I couldn't be bothered. I'm like, just you have access to all of them. You do whatever you feel. Oh my God. Don't do that. You'll never get through a round. The sitting there like, well, what spell should we use? Well, let's go through them all again. Okay. It is the whole, like, it's the skit where they're talking about, hey, we're going to order pizza, right? Need to look at a menu. You're like, no, you don't need to look at a menu. You know what kind of pizza they have. You know all the toppings. Tell me what kind of pizza you want. The only discussion needs to be, what size are we getting? Right? Powered by the Apocalypse is that situation. You really do not need the list of moves, right? The GM needs them. Because you just need to tell me, like, hey, so like, I'm going to take and throw a punch. Well, that's in most Powered by the Apocalypse games called turning to violence, or whatever they called it for that specific instance of Powered by the Apocalypse. I know that you're turning to violence. Go ahead and roll your dice. We're going to take an add in. There tends to be 4 stats for most of the Powered by the Apocalypse games. So, since we're talking about Zombie World earlier, we're going to talk about savagery. So, you would add savagery to your dice roll. If it were a dice game, which it does not, but you would add savagery to your dice roll. So 2d6 plus savagery, so it probably adds +2. You're probably going to be a success, with a drawback, right? Or maybe just a full-on success. And then, we'll see what happens. So you took and punched the individual. It really cuts down on having to worry about all the different minutiae, right? Which sword did you pick up? Was it a magic sword? Did that add plus whatever to this? You got it as a SAG chart. Let the fiction move the story forward. It's not going to be super fun for any individual that's really looking for a tactical RPG. Straight up, if you want a tactical experience Powered by the Apocalypse, it's not for you. But if the fiction is what is interesting to you, Powered by the Apocalypse is going to speak to you.
And as a designer, that sort of thing, especially if you're just starting out with design, having something that works that well and that easily and that's familiar can be attractive to people.
Mm-hmm. The first game that I did ground up design work in, and for myself, was using a Powered by the Apocalypse system. I made my first zine, Powered by the Dreamer, which I was stupid late in delivering. I gotta own the errors, but like that extra time that I took hopefully made for a better game. And I delivered the game with this whole thought process about trying to make a game that puts you in the mindset of a dreamer, right? So anywhere from Neil Gaiman's Sandman, which is way better than what I made, way better. But Neil Gaiman's Sandman over towards Nightmare on Elm Street and the worst of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, that's closer to what I made. But hey. Basically, I wanted to do an RPG where you got to live out your dreams and to make sure that it had all those weird moments that happen in dreams and that you just kind of accept everything as it's coming out.
Right.
And I felt that with Powered by the Apocalypse, that would work. I had played another dream game that it didn't use it did not use a D&D system, but it used the same concepts of you have hit points and basic skills and you're in a dream, and you didn't really have a lot that allowed the dream to just be weird and random as dreams are. And I felt that the system I came up with, and obviously I'm a little biased, gives you more options to do more random things.
Awesome. Let's switch a little bit to talk about the OSR, which is for people who don't know, it's variously old school Renaissance, old school role playing. I think there's other versions of that acronym. There's even a new NSR, new SR, whatever I think out there. But for folks who may not know, essentially it's nostalgia, homage, taking from what they think was the original themes of older D&D, specifically in a lot of cases, Volve, the violet box, not quite red, but violet box D&D. A little bit from Holmes, which came before, and a little bit from Menser, which came after. Talk about your own OSR experiences, games that you might find that might be good ones. And maybe some of the negatives as well that you've run into with the OSR. We're not just shiny happy on this show.
Oh wow. I don't know if I can go into any of the negatives without going too negative. So let's start with shiny happy OSR. OSR, as you said, the greatest game ever made was Basic Expert D&D. Was the white box was the best. Moldvay was the best. Holmes was the best, and there will never be a better game. Absolutely stunning. You cannot imagine the genius that pours out of these boxes. My goodness. If you just open up, the adventures are on the page. No game shall be greater. Hey, so I have my own version of it, and this one is much better than that. OSR. That is my opinion of OSR, right? Basically, it is really taking something that I've read all those. They're like the original games are all good, okay? But they were in an era mostly that was mostly pre-computer, okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so whatever you typed, if there was some really major structural problem with your grammar, which is something that I go through a lot, if there's a typo, if there's this, that, and the other, it was a lot of work to fix that. If you own the original like AD&D rule books, right? You're just going along, there'll be a section header, right? Okay. There'll be, I don't know, mirrors or trapdoors or something like that. One of those types, and there will be a single paragraph of information, and then the next section header. You're like, that's okay. Like it's good. It's good. I'm not knocking it, but at the same time, I'm knocking it because when you get over to the computer error, it's much easier to go, oh, hey, like this is just a single paragraph. Just put in some fluff so it fills out some more space. I mean, something.
Right.
And so the OSR initially was just taking those games that they were no problems with them, legitimately no problem, but they could be polished up. They could be presented much nicer because we have better technology to better present stuff. We can improve some of the artwork, and I will only say some, because some of the artwork in those books is amazing. You're not going to improve it, but there are others that you could spruce it up, right? And so this was born out of that. You take this system that everyone knows. If you've ever played anything D&D, you know how this works. And this is just a really simple but really elegant version of that. You've taken and fixed all the problems. Most OSRs drop THACO out. For those of y'all that don't know, it's a lot of math, and some people love it, and some people don't feel it adds a lot to the game.
Sean loves it, but that's okay. But not in a gatekeeping way, right? I don't love it because it keeps people out. I just like, for whatever reason, I'm a THACO genius, right?
Awesome.
Maybe it's my only piece of genius ever, but I was a THACO genius. I'm like, I get this instantly. I got that idea.
My personal experience was not as good with that because sometimes I got it and sometimes I didn't. It just depended on the day.
Right.
I'm going to go on a total bunny trail, okay? And I apologize now. The Genesis system that is what powers the most recent Star Wars system uses proprietary dice. Those dice have symbols on them. And 2 of these symbols are good. 3 of these symbols are bad. Dozens of these symbols are whatever, right? And we played this at a convention. You'd roll the dice and you'd be like, a GM, what did I roll? Was that good? Was that bad? And they had to tell me every time. And that's part of the thought on THACO, right?
Yeah.
We played the original version of Deadlands at this last Gen Con, okay? And I had not done a good job of vetting that system, okay? I honestly just, when I signed up for it, I thought it was going to be the Savage Worlds version, right? So we get there and it's the original version.
Okay.
That was an amazing GM. That was the best GM because that system that involves dice, cards, thoughts, races, division, this roll equals that roll. Now draw some cards. Now that you're drawing these cards, take and roll these dice. Now you got 5 raises. How do you want to spend them? Okay, well, I'm going to take and toss in poker chips because those mean something too. And I mean, you're just like, there's a lot of options here, guy. What do I need to do? And every time he just carried me through, right? So THACO, I think of it that way. If you got a great GM, and I know that you're a great GM, THACO's a lot of fun, right? If you're having one of your days to where you're like, is that 4, 7, 3, 2, 18? No? What was the math again? Then, you got to have a GM like you.
Right. Right.
But going back to OSR, getting off the bunny trail, lots of time they remove THACO. Okay, it's extra math. Shine it up, remove that. Fix some of your monster problems and fix some of your other problems. And there's a huge love for OSR. Old School Essentials. I mean, Eric Blout, who runs Blout Games, okay, he did Demogorgons and Dark Places and Demogorgons, which is his OSR love letter to Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Came out and he used his Survive This system, which is an OSR system that if you know anything D&D, you can play it. And the game did fine, did absolutely fine. I played it with him. It's a lot of fun, but in terms of sales, it did fine. Okay, I'm not saying that in a negative way. He recently did a Kickstarter where he converted that very RPG over to Old School Essentials, which is considered one of the best OSR games.
Yep.
And it did really well because there's a lot of love for that system.
You know what my problem is with Old School Essentials, and I they did a great job cleaning it up, and it's the same problem actually with Blue Home, which I like. One of the things that made those games great, especially at the time, was the fact that they felt like an underground piece of work, right? This was an underground comic kind of thing.
Yes.
It had blemishes, it had texture, it had smells, it had coffee stains. That came, that was a feature, not a bug. When they clean it up, it's not the same. I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of passion for this. I'm not, like I said, I'm not knocking Old School Essentials at all. It feels like a lot of the passion that went into these underground, and TSR at the time, yes, they had a lot of money. They were always taking out loans, but they were still, they were not they're not wizards. TSR was never Wizards of the Coast, right? I mean, they were successful, but they were never that successful.
Yeah.
And that I think is probably one of my biggest problems with the OSR games is that they're too neat. Now, Merkbray or Morkborg, however you pronounce it, that game is not neat. I can barely read the print on it. But yeah, they cleaned it up too much, and it's too easy to read, and I'm just bored. I'm like, oh yeah, it's like I already know what these rules are. I don't need to read this book, right?
I'm a huge fan of zines, RPG zines. I love them because the very energy that you're talking about, right? That just raw passion, like we're doing this, we're going to put it out there. If it looks great, lovely. If it needs some work, hey man, you bought a zine. It didn't cost you a fortune.
Right.
And I get what you're talking about because when I read those 1E books that I grew up on and love, the flaws, as you say, are really cool. The bad artwork is not bad. You don't have nostalgia for it, but there's also an energy to it. The layouts, they're what were available in the era, right?
Yep.
You look at Old School Essentials, and it had. I'm looking at it right now. It has this super nice setup. It is clean as could be. Let's see. That is a beautiful cover. I mean, you can see that binding. That is beautiful binding, And I mean, the inside cover is not just blank.
Mm-mm.
And there's nice color separation. There's good spacing. It's a beautiful book with beautiful artwork. But as you said, there's something just super DIY. Even though TSR was a real company by the time the Holmes edition came out, and but white box not so much. But by the time the future editions come out, they're a real company. But until you get to late 1E or second edition, there's still that I had this idea. I think there's going to be one paragraph that just talks about mirrors. Okay, that'll be a whole section.
Awesome. Egg, thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on, being our first guest for the Zero Means You're Dead show here on the Go Indie Network. And it's always a good time to go indie now.
Zero Means You're Dead.